Hey folks, and welcome back. Today I want to discuss a unit I find that, over the amount of time they've been in the game, has been seemingly forgotten about in most regards. However, I believe she deserves to be in some sort of conversation as a unit worth obtaining and keeping around for their utility, especially as a one-off unit. I find that this unit fills a very particular niche that takes virtually no effort and little to no investment required to fulfill said role. Let's talk about Valentine Silque, a slept-on support.
Who needs assistance?
Before we get started, I want to let you all know that I'm going to be live on Twitch attempting to plus 10 dual Alm on August 24th. So if you want to come by and see how successful I am, feel free to stop by and say hi. Twitch.tv/Valentia. So we've got a fairly big elephant in the room I should address about Valentine Silque before getting to why I think she stands out in a positive way. So let's get the painfully obvious out of the way. The bad ways that she stands out. This iteration of Silque is vastly underwhelming in her base stats compared to her base form, and accomplished very little that you could see elsewhere. Being a ranged cavalry healer really doesn't lend for much stat allocation as is, but hurts especially more when you're doing an ineffective job at following the stat trend of your original version set for you. A 28-22 offensive spread just seals the deal when your defenses are already hampered because of ranged cavalry BST. Just look at this stat comparison and tell me how she comes out on top whatsoever. In short, if you want a healer to fit any sort of offensive or defensive build using higher investment, you're better off passing on Silque for the most part, since almost every other healer could perform that role statistically better. Perhaps her HP stat can make the difference in her avoiding some HP targeting isolation effects, but even then it's a stretch because that's assuming you're invested into her with merges and whatever else to enable her. Otherwise, she also falls victim to cavalry effectiveness in this variant compared to her infantry version, which comparatively has Poison Dagger. It's fairly obvious that from a statistical standpoint, she's simply not worth it. So now you're probably wondering, what makes her worth it then? And how does that justify her poor statistics?
Oh,
Well, look no further than her base kit. I personally cannot say that any other unit comes to mind that provides such an immediate and out-of-box supportive kit that works in almost any on-the-fly team composition, coupled with her accessibility. While her buffs aren't the most outstanding in the numbers department, they have an impact nonetheless. Furthermore, their activation conditions make it effortless to pair Silque with another unit while keeping herself out of danger. The most impactful skills in her kit come from the combination of Rapport Wand and Speed Opening. Both of these skills in total give the ally with the highest speed on your team bonuses of +5 attack and defense as well as +6 speed, respectively. And the best part about these skills is that their conditions only rely on a speed check amongst your team. There's no positional requirements and they'll activate on every single turn that she's alive. In simpler terms, whoever has the highest speed on the team with Silque gets a respectable and serviceable boost to their visible bonuses no matter where either unit is located on the map. Free stat buffs from across the map sounds pretty sweet, but that's just on paper. How can we put this into practice? Our first example is one that might have to be adjusted around for it to work in some cases, but nonetheless fills this position perfectly. Eliwood in most team compositions nowadays is meant to be a Gale Force sweeper thanks to his blazing Durandal refine. It's made him a very popular investment choice for a lot of people, and I find that having a Silque lying around in the team composition would benefit him greatly. For the most part, given you fully invested into an Eliwood, he should have around 38 to 43 visible speed based on his IVs, Dragon Flowers, and Resplendent version are at play. Depending on that number, you'll have to play around with the team composition to make sure Eliwood does get the buffs by being your fastest unit. When he has access to those buffs, just having those extra stats every single turn, no matter how far he's into enemy lines, will greatly impact his offensive potential, as well as his own survivability. Having those specific buffs for his attack, speed, and defense could make the difference in him surviving an enemy phase while sweeping a couple of units during his initiation. Even the same practice works for his Brave variant, and even that's a whole lot easier given his base speed cap is easier to work around compared to his base version. While he might not be Gale Forcing around the map, his sheer offensive potential can only be further strengthened by Silque's buffs, no matter where she may be. I find that for those two examples, they're usually easy to accommodate when your team composition is one that is more on-the-fly prepared. With that being said, I find that perfectly describes where she'll thrive with whatever unit she needs to buff. Arena Assault. When you're having to decide on a team composition you're going to run to trump the enemy team, having someone who can not only readily buff your sweeper for that match, but also provide any backline utility other allies might need, such as healing, can be quite useful. Her cavalry movement further adds to her utility, as it'll allow her to catch up to your sweeper or other allies to further support and heal them while having the flexibility to get out of enemy range. Frankly, you can slot her into any makeshift team that has a sweeper with high speed, and you'd be simply setting yourself up for success. With all that being said, it comes down to this, the accessibility costs. This is going to depend on one of two scenarios. One is if you've been playing the game since about February of 2020, if not before, when she was first given out. The second is if you just started the game fairly recently or anytime after she was initially given out. Frankly, for those who've already been playing the game since she came out, should most likely have some sort of variant of her at either 4 or 5 star, maybe even both. At that rate, you'd only really need 20,000 feathers if you only have a 4-star copy lying around, although if you do want to run the 4-star version, you're only really losing out on 2 points in attack and defense. Otherwise, if you don't have a copy of her, all you need are 100 heroic grails, which for a one-time price on a unit you won't need to invest in getting merges for to be useful, I'd say that's perfectly justified, especially with how valuable your grails are. Besides that, the same feather requirements are still present, those of which shouldn't take too long to scavenge if you're in need of them. And to future-proof her for when trait fruits get added, you've got no need to give her any sort of changes to her IVs unless you have plans on heavily investing into her. She does have a couple super boons, but for the sake of using Silque for the innate purpose discussed today, you don't have to worry about using fruits on her. Trust me, you'll want those things saved up for units that crucially need them. So that's my case for Valentine Silque. Was I able to convince you or sway you into her direction? If so, feel free to let me know in the comments below. YouTube's algorithm has apparently changed based on viewer retention as well as comments and likes, so both are greatly appreciated. And while you're here, feel free to subscribe to be notified for future videos. Anyways, this has been Valentia. Thanks for watching.